Pharaoh Khufu, one of ancient Egypt's most renowned figures, was born during the latter half of the 27th century BC in the Old Kingdom era of Egypt. Historians generally agree that Khufu was the son of Pharaoh Sneferu, as the practice of primogeniture, where the throne was typically passed to the eldest son, was prevalent in Old Kingdom Egypt. Given that Sneferu had numerous sons, it is almost certain that one of them, Khufu, inherited the throne. Sneferu was an exceptional ruler whose reign left an indelible mark on Egypt, particularly through his ambitious pyramid-building projects, a legacy that would deeply influence Khufu. If Sneferu was indeed his father, then Khufu's mother was Queen Pharaohs I, though Egyptian pharaohs were polygamous, and Sneferu likely had multiple wives. Pharaohs, however, likely rose to prominence within the royal court in Men-Nefer, the ancient capital, located near modern-day Cairo, only when it became clear that her son, Khufu, was destined to succeed his father. Due to the polygamous traditions of the time, Khufu had a large family, consisting of many half-brothers and half-sisters. Estimates of Khufu's birth year are largely drawn from ancient Egyptian king lists, which suggest that his father, Sneferu, died around 2590 BC after a lengthy reign of approximately 25 years. Given these timelines, scholars surmise that Khufu was well into adulthood when he ascended the throne, leading to an estimation that he was born sometime between 2640 BC and 2620 BC. However, the lack of complete and detailed records from this period, over 4,600 years ago, makes it difficult to pinpoint an exact date. Although Khufu is one of ancient Egypt's most well-known pharaohs, he is most famously associated with the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. This monumental tomb, located on the Giza Plateau, just outside modern-day Cairo, is the largest of the pyramids and the only surviving structure among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was not just a tomb, but a bold statement of Khufu's divine status on earth, a testament to his power and reign. Yet, despite the grandeur of the Great Pyramid, which stands as a lasting tribute to Khufu's legacy, very little is known about the man himself. Most written records from this period have perished due to the fragile nature of papyrus over millennia. However, some details of Khufu's life and reign can be pieced together from other forms of evidence, such as inscriptions on temple and tomb walls, accounts from later classical authors, archaeological findings, and, of course, the Great Pyramid itself, which remains a remarkable source of insight into his reign. Khufu's reign occurred during the Old Kingdom, a significant era in Egyptian history. Egypt's history is typically divided into distinct periods, with the earliest being the pre-dynastic era, which spanned from the late 5th millennium BC until around 3100 BC. During this time, Egypt was not yet a unified kingdom, and the land was divided into 2 regions, Lower Egypt in the Nile Delta and Upper Egypt to the south. However, a shared culture began to emerge, marked by advances in agriculture, trade, religious practices, and the development of the hieroglyphic writing system. The second major era in Egyptian history began around 3100 BC, when a ruler named Narmer successfully united Upper and Lower Egypt under his dominion. This unification marked the start of Egypt's first dynasty of pharaohs. Interestingly, the term pharaoh originally meant great house, referring to the royal palace rather than the ruler himself. It wasn't until the New Kingdom period that pharaoh became synonymous with the king. The early pharaohs, like Narmer, were not merely rulers. They were seen as living gods, a key reason why later pharaohs, such as Khufu, could command immense resources to construct monumental tombs. Narmer's unification established the foundation for what is known as the early dynastic period, during which Egypt's first and second dynasties ruled until just after 2700 BC. It was around 2670 BC that a new phase in Egyptian history, the Old Kingdom, began with the rise of the Third Dynasty. The Old Kingdom, which spanned from 2670 BC to about 2180 BC, was a time of remarkable cultural and architectural achievements, and it encompassed 6 dynasties, from the 3rd to the 8th. During the Old Kingdom, Egypt developed into a powerful, centralized state. Under the direction of its pharaohs, Egypt expanded its territory westward into what is now Libya, eastward into the Sinai Peninsula, and southward toward Nubia, modern-day Sudan. This era also saw the construction of massive monuments, a well-organized military, and a bureaucracy that managed complex construction projects and collected taxes, primarily in the form of agricultural produce from the fertile lands along the Nile. Khufu, a key figure in this period, belonged to the 4th dynasty, which ruled between approximately 2630 BC and 2500 BC. Evidence of his reign can be found on ancient king lists, such as the Abydos king list, which was carved into a temple wall by Pharaoh Seti I around 1300 BC. By the time Khufu and his dynasty rose to power, the Old Kingdom had already become a highly developed state. Its armies controlled vast lands, and an extensive bureaucracy of scribes and administrators oversaw tax collection and large-scale construction projects. The capital city, Men-Nefer, later known as Memphis, had emerged as the center of political and religious life. Not far from Memphis lay the Giza Plateau and the Dashur Necropolis, both of which housed intricate complexes of tombs and pyramids built to honor the pharaohs and other prominent figures of the time. Khufu's reign unfolded in this setting of grandeur and centralized power. Interestingly, depending on which historical source you consult, you might come across different names for Khufu. While modern Egyptologists predominantly use the name Khufu, earlier historians often referred to him as Cheops, a Hellenized version of his name that was popularized by ancient Greek writers like Herodotus. Khufu's full Egyptian name was Khnum Khufu, with Khnum referring to the Egyptian deity who, during the Old Kingdom, was considered both the god of the Nile and a creator god. According to mythology, Khnum crafted human beings on a potter's wheel from clay. The name Khnum Khufu means protected by Khnum, emphasizing that Khufu was believed to have divine protection from the gods. Over time, Khnum's significance waned, being eclipsed by deities like Ra, the sun god, and Ammonius. However, in Khufu's era, Khnum was a highly revered deity. There are even other variations of Khufu's name, such as Supphis, which appears in later Egyptian writings and offers yet another Hellenic rendition of his name. Just as there are uncertainties surrounding his birth and parentage, there is also some ambiguity about when exactly Khufu ascended the throne and how long his reign lasted. The Abydos king list and other similar records vary slightly in their details, but all suggest that Khufu assumed power around 2590 BC after the death of his father, Sneferu. As for the length of his reign, accounts differ. Some traditions claim Khufu ruled for as long as 50 years, though the majority of sources agree that he reigned for about 25 to 30 years, which would place the end of his rule around 2565 BC. Regardless of the exact length, Khufu's reign left a monumental legacy, both figuratively and literally, through the construction of the Great Pyramid, which stands as a lasting tribute to his power and ambition. As we try to piece together the life of Khufu, one estimate suggests that he lived to be around 60 years old, a ripe age by the standards of the time. When Khufu ascended the throne, Egypt was experiencing an unparalleled period of prosperity, expanding its influence far beyond the Nile Valley. One of the significant regions Khufu is credited with bringing under Egypt's dominion was the Sinai Peninsula. Situated to the east, Sinai formed a strategic land bridge between Egypt and the broader Middle East. This region was prized not just for its location, but also for its rich resources, especially the vast copper deposits at Timna. In addition to copper, Sinai was home to valuable minerals like turquoise and gold, the latter being a key material in Egypt's iconic jewelry and burial goods. Archaeological sites, such as Wadi Maghair in southwestern Sinai, reveal the remnants of ancient mining activities. Significantly, cartouches bearing Khufu's name have been found carved into the rock at these sites, suggesting that he personally oversaw or authorized mining expeditions during his reign. These expeditions to Sinai weren't just about minerals, though. There is evidence to suggest that Khufu's Egypt was actively engaging in trade with the Levant to secure rare goods like the precious cedar wood from Byblos, a material that played a crucial role in construction and crafting. Additionally, a fort at Tel Ras Budran, located on the western side of the Sinai Peninsula, hints at an organized effort to ship resources like copper and turquoise across the Gulf of Suez. From there, these precious goods would have been transported overland to the royal capital of Men-Nefer, or Memphis, underscoring the sophisticated logistical networks Egypt had developed under Khufu's rule. The use of riverine and maritime routes connecting Sinai with the heart of Egypt points to the growing presence of Egypt along the Red Sea coastline during Khufu's reign. It was during Khufu's rule that Egypt's outward focus expanded beyond the Nile River, stretching westwards into the oases of the Western Desert and eastwards towards the Red Sea coast. Settlements discovered along the Red Sea from Khufu's time suggest an increased level of activity in the region. One of the most fascinating finds from this period is located at Wadi al-Jarf, about 100 kilometers south of modern Suez. Here, archaeologists have uncovered what is thought to be the world's oldest artificial harbor, dating to Khufu's reign. Numerous stone anchors and other artifacts recovered from the site indicate an impressive level of maritime trade and activity, reinforcing the notion of a flourishing Egypt under Khufu's rule. The vast influence of Khufu extended beyond Egypt's borders, but just as intriguing are the glimpses we get into his domestic life and family. Like many Egyptian pharaohs, Khufu had multiple wives. His primary queen was Meritites I, who was also likely his half-sister, in line with the long-standing Egyptian tradition of royal siblings marrying to maintain the purity of the bloodline. Meritite's prominent position among Khufu's wives is attested by the fact that a pyramid was constructed in her honor near Khufu's own Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau. Another of Khufu's wives was Hinutsun, whose name appears on the inventory stela, an artifact from the 7th century BC that lists the contents of a temple dating back to the Old Kingdom. Together with his wives, Khufu fathered many children, including at least a dozen sons and daughters. His eldest son, Kawab, was poised to inherit the throne but tragically died before his father. Another son, Khafre, would go on to succeed him and build the second largest pyramid at Giza. One of Khufu's daughters, Nefertibet, has also left her mark on history, as her tomb contains a beautifully preserved slab stela, adorned with hieroglyphs, that depicts her seated and partaking in a meal. Despite the passing of nearly 5 millennia, some material remnants from Khufu's reign have survived to offer us insights into his time on the throne. One such artifact is the Westcar Papyrus. Acquired by British explorer Henry Westcar in the 1820s, the papyrus contains a collection of 5 stories set in Khufu's court, known as King Khufu and the Magicians. These tales describe the miraculous feats performed by magicians in Khufu's presence, with one story recounting how a magician was able to reattach the heads of animals and even a human being after they had been decapitated. While this portrayal of Khufu might seem callous, demanding such gruesome acts to test the magician's powers, some Egyptologists interpret the stories as demonstrating Khufu's curiosity about magic and religion. Another striking artifact that has survived from Khufu's reign is the Khufu statuette. This small ivory sculpture, although contested by some scholars regarding its authenticity, depicts Khufu seated on a throne and wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt. The cartouche inscribed on the statuette bears the name Khnum Khufu, confirming the identity of the figure, as the famous pharaoh. Even though this statuette is modest in size, it offers a powerful symbol of Khufu's authority and the divine protection he believed to receive from Khnum, the god of the Nile. In all, these fragments of Khufu's life and reign paint a picture of a ruler who wielded extraordinary power, not only as a conqueror and builder, but also as a religious figurehead in a civilization that saw its pharaohs as living gods. Khufu's legacy, primarily his association with the Great Pyramid, has been discussed and preserved through various sources, some ancient and some discovered more recently. In 1903, Sir Flinders Petrie, the British archaeologist renowned for introducing modern archaeological methods, found the Khufu statuette. This tiny ivory statue has become a focal piece in understanding the pharaoh's rule, now housed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Petrie's discovery, along with other material evidence, paints a picture of Khufu, but much of our understanding of his reign comes from ancient texts, which are often distanced by centuries from the pharaoh's time. One significant ancient source is the Egyptian priest Manetho, who lived in the 3rd century BC and compiled a history of Egypt called the Egyptiaca. Though surviving only in fragments, Manetho's work provides insights into Egypt's rulers. He referred to Khufu as Supphis I and identified him as the second pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. Manetho claims that Khufu reigned for 63 years, a period inconsistent with most archaeological records, which suggest a shorter rule. Nevertheless, he accurately credited Khufu with constructing the Great Pyramid. More intriguingly, Manetho suggested that Khufu, early in his reign, disrespected the gods but later atoned by writing a sacred book. This claim has been met with skepticism by modern scholars, as there is no evidence of Egyptian kings writing books, especially during such an early period. However, the mention of this sacred book raises questions about the traditions or sources Manetho may have drawn from to describe Khufu in this manner. Manetho also referenced the Greek historian Herodotus, who lived in the 5th century BC and is often called the father of history. Herodotus' histories contain accounts of Khufu, whom he referred to by his Greek name, Cheops. While Herodotus is best known for detailing the rise of the Persian Empire, he included a mix of geography, anthropology, and fantastic tales in his work. His description of Khufu was unflattering, portraying him as a pharaoh who oppressed his people and brought misery to Egypt. According to Herodotus, Egyptian priests informed him that Khufu closed the temples, stopped sacrifices, and forced the population to labor on the Great Pyramid. Furthermore, in a sensational claim, Herodotus alleged that Khufu prostituted his daughter to raise funds for the pyramid's construction, though such claims are clearly embellished and must be treated with caution. Herodotus was not alone in his negative portrayal of Khufu. Diodorus Siculus, a Greek historian writing in the 1st century BC, offered a similarly critical view in his work, the Bibliotheca Historica. Diodorus referred to Khufu as Chemis, another derivation of Cheops, and described him as a tyrant who forced the Egyptian people into servitude for the construction of the Great Pyramid. Like Herodotus, Diodorus marveled at how the pyramids had been built, but he also propagated the view that Khufu committed cruel and violent acts, causing great suffering to his people. However, both historians were mistaken about the timing of Khufu's reign, placing him after the Ramesside period, a full millennium later than Khufu's actual time. Diodorus did acknowledge that another tradition dated the pyramids to over 3,000 years earlier, which is more accurate, but his and Herodotus' accounts must be approached with caution due to their historical inaccuracies. Despite the discrepancies in dating, it is striking that ancient writers like Manetho, Herodotus, and Diodorus consistently depicted Khufu as a harsh ruler. Their accounts, while containing elements of truth, were clearly influenced by the passage of time and the storyteller's biases. Nevertheless, Khufu's alleged tyranny is almost always connected to the monumental task of building the Great Pyramid of Giza, a wonder of the ancient world that cemented his legacy, even if it led to claims of cruelty and exploitation. Khufu's reign coincided with a century of pyramid building in Egypt as tombs for deceased pharaohs. This grand architectural tradition peaked with the construction of Khufu's pyramid at Giza, a project that would define his reign and earn him a lasting place in history, albeit accompanied by a reputation for oppression and despotism in the writings of ancient historians. This part of the story delves into the incredible engineering achievements leading up to the construction of Khufu's Great Pyramid, which benefited from a long tradition of pyramid building by earlier pharaohs. Pharaoh Djoser, from the Third Dynasty, was the first to experiment with large-scale pyramid construction. He commissioned the step pyramid at Saqqara, which stood at over 60 meters high with 6 tiers, an extraordinary feat for its time. However, this achievement would soon be eclipsed by the massive pyramids that followed. Sneferu, believed to be Khufu's father and the founder of the Fourth Dynasty, was a pioneer in pyramid construction. During his reign, he ordered the construction of 3 pyramids: the Pyramid of Midam, the Red Pyramid, and the Bent Pyramid. The Red and Bent Pyramids were both over 100 meters tall, with the Red Pyramid being the most advanced in its construction. Although the Bent Pyramid had an unusual shape, it retains a significant amount of its limestone casing, making it a unique monument today. This era of pyramid building was marked by trial and error, with some pyramids collapsing and others standing the test of time. By the time Khufu ascended to the throne, this long period of experimentation had culminated in techniques and knowledge that would enable the construction of his monumental Great Pyramid. Sneferu's obsession with perfecting the pyramid design might have influenced Khufu, who likely inherited his father's passion for grand architectural projects. Growing up, Khufu would have seen the Red and Bent Pyramids under construction at Dashur. When it was his turn to build his own pyramid, Khufu chose the Giza Plateau as the site, which offered a commanding view of the Nile Valley below. The Great Pyramid he constructed would dwarf his father's achievements, standing over 146 meters tall, with a perfectly square base measuring 230 meters on each side. To give a sense of scale, this is about 2.5 times longer than a modern football field and 5 times wider. The sheer amount of material needed to construct the Great Pyramid was staggering. It is estimated that the pyramid consists of 2.3 million blocks of stone, many of which were over a meter in size and weighed around 2.5 tons each. This adds up to over 6 million tons of stone. While much of the material was sourced locally from quarries near Giza, some of the stone had to be transported from distant locations. For example, 8,000 tons of granite used in parts of the pyramid was quarried from Aswan, located over 850 kilometers to the south, and transported down the Nile to the construction site. The construction process itself was a massive undertaking. The pyramid was assembled in 216 layers of blocks, with each layer averaging about 2/3 of a meter in height. The question of how such a monumental structure was built and who was responsible for the labor has fascinated archaeologists and Egyptologists for centuries. A common misconception, popularized in ancient and modern times, is that the pyramids were built by armies of slaves. However, archaeological evidence, including the discovery of a workers' village near the Great Pyramid in the late 1980s, suggests that the builders were actually paid laborers. These workers appear to have been reasonably well fed, with protein-rich diets that were superior to much of the population at the time. The number of laborers involved in constructing the pyramid is still debated. Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BC, suggested that 360,000 workers were involved, while Herodotus claimed that 100,000 laborers worked in shifts of 3 months at a time. Both of these figures are speculative, having been written nearly 2 millennia after Khufu's reign. Nonetheless, it is clear that the pharaoh employed tens of thousands of workers, if not more, to build the Great Pyramid. In recent decades, scholars have adopted more scientific approaches to estimate the size of the workforce. Some experiments have involved using tools from the time to carve and move limestone blocks similar to those used in the pyramid, providing insights into the manpower and techniques needed to achieve such a monumental feat. This part sheds light on the incredible logistics, labor, and ingenuity behind the construction of Khufu's Great Pyramid. A significant breakthrough in understanding this process came in the mid-2010s, when a complete quarried limestone block along with ancient tools was discovered in a quarry dating back to Khufu's reign. Using precise replicas of these tools, researchers found that it would take 4 workers 3 8-hour days to quarry and carve out just one of the 2.5-ton blocks used in the pyramid's construction. However, by employing water to wet the stone, the process could be greatly accelerated, though it remains doubtful that such large amounts of water would have been available at the quarry. Based on these findings, it was estimated that a labor force of 3,500 workers at the quarry could produce 250 blocks per day. By doubling that workforce to 7,000, the output would increase to 500 blocks per day, meaning it would have taken around 13 years to quarry all the stone blocks needed for the Great Pyramid. This is a feasible estimate, though it's important to note that this number only accounts for those quarrying and cutting the stones. An additional workforce would have been required to transport the stones from the quarries to Giza, as well as to work on-site at the pyramid itself. Still others would have been needed in ancillary roles, producing tools, transporting food and water for the workers, and other logistical tasks. A new study published in 2024 added another crucial piece to the puzzle of pyramid construction. It revealed the existence of a now extinct 64-kilometer branch of the Nile, known as the Aramat Nile branch, which once flowed from the main Nile River to Giza. This waterway, which has long since dried up and was buried under farmland, would have allowed workers to transport the heavy stone blocks by river directly to the building site at Giza, simplifying the process enormously. Further fascinating evidence comes from the discovery of the Diary of Mirror in 2013. This ancient papyrus text, written in hieroglyphs and constituting the oldest surviving papyrus in the world, was found near a cave at Wadi al-Jarf on Egypt's Red Sea coast. It is essentially a work log kept by Mirror, a mid-ranking overseer in charge of a team of workers at the Tura quarries, where limestone blocks were cut for the pyramid. In his diary, Mirror provides detailed accounts of the work teams involved in pyramid construction, referring to Khufu's pyramid as Ake Khufu, or the horizon of Khufu. He also notes the transportation of the blocks by boat, as well as the cost of food and other materials needed to sustain the workforce. Although not all of the diary has been deciphered, what has been revealed offers invaluable insight into the day-to-day operations behind the construction of the pyramid. One of the most hotly debated aspects of pyramid construction is how the enormous stones were lifted into place. Ancient historians like Diodorus Siculus speculated on this. Writing in his Bibliotheca, he mentioned the common belief that the stones used to build the pyramids were dragged all the way from Arabia and then lifted into place using massive ramps, as cranes capable of lifting such enormous blocks had not yet been invented. Today, we know that most of the stones were quarried locally in the Giza region, though the granite blocks did have to be transported long distances. The question of how the blocks were raised remains contentious. Many scholars agree that some form of a ramp was likely used, with laborers dragging the stones up to the higher sections of the pyramid. However, the sheer size of the pyramid creates complications. For the ramp to function, it would have needed to be nearly a mile long, and in some estimates, the ramp itself would have been larger than the pyramid. Additionally, the Giza Plateau's geography, with its relatively narrow space and steep cliffs, would have made it difficult to construct such a large ramp. These factors have led Egyptologists to disagree on the precise method used to raise the stones. In recent years, new theories have emerged. Some suggest that water power might have been employed to move the stones, though this remains speculative. Despite the ongoing debate, the combination of discoveries like the Diary of Mirror and the Aramat Nile branch continues to shed light on the complex and ingenious methods used to build Khufu's monumental pyramid. Herodotus' account of Khufu and the construction of the Great Pyramid offers some captivating insights into how ancient Greeks perceived Egyptian monumental works. According to Herodotus, the construction began with the creation of vast roads, purportedly stretching all the way from Arabia to Egypt. This would have enabled the transport of the quarried stone overland, while some of it was also shipped by sea. The staggering workforce involved, according to Herodotus, consisted of 100,000 men who labored in shifts of 3 months, implying that the workers were not enslaved, but likely conscripted for seasonal labor. This workforce, which worked on rotation, reflects the organizational complexity required to build such an immense structure over 2 decades, as Herodotus claims. The roads themselves reportedly took 10 years to construct, and their remains were said to be visible in Herodotus' time, 2 millennia after Khufu's reign. This highlights how the pyramid's construction left a lasting mark on Egypt's landscape, further reinforcing the project's grandeur and Khufu's legacy. Moreover, Herodotus provided a glimpse into the logistical demands of the project, noting that there were hieroglyphics on the pyramid's exterior describing the vast quantities of food required to feed the workers. According to an interpreter, it was said that 1,600 talents of silver were spent solely on feeding the labor force. Given that an attic talent weighed just over 25 kilograms, this meant that over 40 tons of silver went towards food alone, reflecting the extraordinary economic resources required to complete the monument. The sheer scale of the undertaking cannot be overstated. The pyramid project necessitated an immense labor force, not only to quarry and transport the stones, but also to support the workforce with food, tools, and supplies. Essentially, a significant portion of Egyptian society was mobilized to erect this colossal tomb for a single pharaoh. Such dedication and resources are only comprehensible when one considers the religious and cultural significance of the king in ancient Egypt. By the 4th dynasty, Egyptian society was well accustomed to the concept of their kings being semi-divine beings. Pharaohs like Khufu were viewed as earthly manifestations of gods, which justified the massive commitment of labor and resources to the construction of the pyramid. Khufu's broader name, Khnum-Khufu, reflects this semi-divine status, tying him to the god Khnum, who was believed to be the creator of humankind. The association with divinity was further solidified by the scale and grandeur of the pyramid. To an ancient Egyptian traveling to Men-Nefer Memphis and seeing the Great Pyramid towering above the Giza Plateau, it would have been a profoundly awe-inspiring sight, further legitimizing the divine nature of the king in their minds. Diodorus, the ancient historian, expressed a similar sentiment, marveling at the monumental blocks and remarking that they appeared not to be the work of men, but the handiwork of gods, as though they had been miraculously set down in the sand. The complexity of the Great Pyramid extended far beyond its external grandeur. Khufu's architects incorporated a sophisticated network of chambers, shafts, and passageways into the pyramid's interior. These began with an entrance located about 17 meters above the pyramid's base. This leads into a series of narrow passageways and chambers, some of which are still subject to ongoing debate regarding their purpose and symbolism. One such chamber is the subterranean chamber, located over 25 meters below the base of the pyramid, hewn out of the bedrock itself. This chamber, measuring over 8 by 14 meters, includes a large pit, though its intended function remains unclear. Some scholars suggest that Khufu initially intended this chamber to be his burial site, but later opted for a chamber within the pyramid itself. Another interior feature of note is the so-called Queen's Chamber, a misleading name, as there is no conclusive evidence that it was ever intended for Khufu's wives. This chamber contains narrow shafts that extend outward, which have only recently begun to be explored using modern technology. The Queen's Chamber remains one of the most enigmatic parts of the pyramid, with much still to be learned about its significance. The King's Chamber is perhaps the most discussed element of the pyramid's interior. Located roughly a third of the way up the pyramid, the chamber measures about 10.5 by 5 meters, with a flat ceiling nearly 6 meters high. The chamber's roof is an engineering marvel, constructed from 9 massive granite blocks weighing between 25 and 80 tons, brought all the way from Aswan in southern Egypt. The feat of raising these blocks over 60 meters and placing them atop the king's chamber represents one of the greatest engineering achievements of antiquity. Tragically, by the time the king's chamber was rediscovered in modern times, all of its contents, aside from a broken granite sarcophagus, had long been looted by tomb robbers. Beyond the king's chamber, further passageways and chambers are found, including the star shafts, 2 narrow ducts that run upward from the king's chamber to the exterior of the pyramid. These shafts point toward the sky, and their purpose remains a subject of scholarly debate. Some theories suggest that the shafts were aligned with specific star constellations, such as Orion's belt, which held significant religious meaning to the Egyptians. Alternatively, some argue that these shafts were merely air vents, though this seems less likely, given that similar shafts are not found in other pyramids of the Old Kingdom. It is more plausible that the star shafts were intended to align with constellations that were important to Khufu and the Egyptian cosmology, such as Orion, Sirius, and Alpha Draconis, which would have been close to the North Celestial Pole during Khufu's time. Thus, the interior chambers and passageways of the Great Pyramid not only reflect the technical mastery of Khufu's architects, but also their deep understanding of celestial alignment and the religious significance of the stars. The Great Pyramid was more than just a tomb. It was a monumental symbol of the divine nature of the king, an awe-inspiring structure meant to ensure Khufu's place among the gods for eternity. Herodotus' account of the construction of Khufu's pyramid offers a captivating glimpse into ancient history. According to the Greek historian, Khufu not only oversaw the building of his monumental pyramid, but also initiated the construction of vast roads, stretching from Arabia to Egypt, to facilitate the transport of quarried rock. While the majority of the stone was carried overland, some were transported by sea. Herodotus described the labor as seasonal, with 100,000 men working in 3-month rotations. Interestingly, this suggests that the workers were not slaves, but instead participants in a highly organized system of labor. Herodotus believed that the construction of the road alone took 10 years and hinted that parts of it were still visible during his time, nearly 2,000 years after Khufu's reign. When it came to the pyramid itself, Herodotus estimated that it took 20 years to complete. He posited that the enormous stone slabs were raised from tier to tier using giant wooden levers. He also reported that hieroglyphics on the pyramid's exterior described the massive quantities of food required to feed the workforce, claiming that 1,600 talents of silver had been spent solely on feeding the workers. Given that an attic talent weighed over 25 kilograms, this translates to about 40 tons of silver used just for provisions. This insight into the massive scale of the labor and resources expended to build a tomb for one man illustrates the profound power of the pharaoh. By the 4th dynasty, Egyptian society viewed their kings as semi-divine beings, and this religious idealization enabled the mobilization of vast portions of society toward the construction of colossal monuments like Khufu's pyramid. This perception of the pharaoh as a living god, embodied in Khufu's name, Khnum Khufu, helped cement the king's celestial status. One can only imagine the awe that ancient Egyptians must have felt when they arrived in Men Nefer, modern-day Memphis, and witnessed the towering structure of the Great Pyramid with its polished limestone gleaming in the sun. The sheer scale of the monument would have reinforced the idea of the king as a godlike figure. In fact, Diodorus Siculus, a later historian, wrote that the blocks of the pyramid seemed less like the slow handiwork of men and more like the sudden creation of a god. Khufu's pyramid was more than just a simple structure of blocks. It housed an intricate system of shafts, chambers, and tunnels. Visitors would have entered the pyramid through an entrance roughly 17 meters above the base. From there, a network of passageways led to various chambers, including the subterranean chamber, which was cut into the bedrock 25 meters below the pyramid's base. The exact purpose of this chamber remains a mystery, though some believe Khufu originally intended to be buried there before changing his plans. The pyramid also contains the so-called Queen's Chamber, though it is unclear if it was meant to house one of Khufu's wives. This chamber is particularly enigmatic due to the small, mysterious shafts that extend from it, which modern technology has only begun to explore. The most famous part of the Great Pyramid is the King's Chamber, located about 46 meters above the pyramid's base. It measures about 10.5 by 5 meters, with a flat ceiling supported by 9 massive granite blocks brought all the way from Aswan. These blocks weigh between 25 and 80 tons, and their placement near the midway point of the pyramid is considered one of the great engineering feats of the ancient world. Sadly, when the chamber was opened in modern times, it was found looted, with Khufu's mummy and treasures long since stolen. The only remaining artifact was a broken granite sarcophagus, which would have once held the king's body. Perhaps the most intriguing feature of the king's chamber is the star shafts, two narrow ducts that extend from the chamber to the pyramid's exterior, pointing toward the night sky. While some Egyptologists suggest these shafts were merely for ventilation, others believe they had astronomical significance, possibly aligning with important constellations like Orion's Belt, Sirius, or Alpha Draconis. When visitors come to Giza today, the Great Pyramid presents a somewhat different appearance than it did in Khufu's time. Today, one sees the exposed layers of limestone blocks and the flat top of the pyramid. However, the pyramid originally had a smooth, polished finish, encased in white limestone. At its peak, a pyramid ion, or capstone, would have topped the structure. Contrary to popular belief, this capstone was likely made of smooth limestone or polished stone, rather than gold or electrum. Though the pyramid ion has long since been lost, scholars know from surviving examples of 4th dynasty pyramid ions that they were not typically gilded. The Great Pyramid's smooth outer casing fell off over time due to natural disasters, such as the 1303 Great Earthquake of Crete, and much of it was later repurposed for building mosques and other structures in Cairo. Estimates for the pyramid's construction time vary, with a conservative estimate placing the duration at around 20 years. Some believe the unfinished nature of certain chambers indicates that the pyramid was not fully complete when Khufu died around 2565 BC. Though Khufu was likely buried with immense wealth, all of it, including his mummy, was stolen in antiquity. A tradition recorded by Diodorus Siculus suggests that Khufu, hated for his tyranny, instructed his family to bury him in an unmarked grave to avoid having his body defiled by angry subjects. However, this is unlikely, as the pyramid's passages and entry points would have been sealed after the pharaoh's burial. Khufu's legacy continued with his sons, Jedefra and Khafre. While Jedefra's reign was short, Khafre ruled for a long time and emulated his father by building his own pyramid on the Giza Plateau. Khafre's pyramid is the second largest at Giza, and it is believed that he was responsible for constructing the iconic Sphinx, whose face is thought to represent Khafre himself. Later, Khafre's son Menkaure would build the third and smallest of the Great Pyramids. The 4th dynasty marked the height of Egypt's Old Kingdom, but it came to an end around 2496 BC after the death of Khufu's grandson, Shepseskaf. Despite this, the Great Pyramid continued to inspire awe throughout the centuries, being included in Antipater of Sidon's list of the seven wonders of the world in the early 1st century BC. Remarkably, the Great Pyramid is the only one of the seven wonders still standing today, a testament to the continuity of Egyptian culture and the reverence with which ancient Egyptians viewed their monumental tombs. The advent of Arab rule in the 7th century brought significant changes to Egypt, and the fate of Khufu's pyramid was no exception. When the followers of Muhammad spread out from Arabia, conquering the Middle East and North Africa, their curiosity about the ancient wonders led to both exploration and destruction. One of the most notable figures connected to the Great Pyramid during this time was the Abbasid Caliph al-Ma'mun, who is believed to have ordered his men to tunnel into Khufu's pyramid in the early 9th century. Unlike others who would later follow, al-Ma'mun's intentions were driven by a sense of inquiry rather than destruction. However, not all who came after him shared this mindset. A more destructive attempt came in the late 12th century under the rule of Al-Aziz Uthman, the son of the famed Muslim leader Saladin. Uthman, in a surge of iconoclastic zeal, sought to destroy the pyramids, seeing them as relics of a pagan past. Fortunately, his engineers failed in their attempt, and the only significant damage occurred to the Pyramid of Menkaure, the smallest of the three. This act of religious fervor would leave a permanent scar on Menkaure's pyramid, though the other two remained intact. Natural disasters also played a role in the damage done to Khufu's pyramid. In 1303, a devastating earthquake struck the region, cracking and dislodging large sections of the marble casing that once covered the pyramid. This same earthquake also destroyed one of the other ancient wonders of the world, the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Over the centuries, many mistakenly believed that Napoleon Bonaparte's campaign in Egypt at the end of the 18th century had caused significant damage to the pyramids and the Sphinx, but there is no solid evidence to support this claim. Instead, Napoleon's expedition gave rise to the modern discipline of Egyptology, which has since spearheaded efforts to preserve the Giza monuments. Unfortunately, preservation has not always been enough to protect the pyramids from nature's wrath. In 1992, another earthquake shook Cairo, causing the Great Pyramid to shrink slightly as internal blocks caved in. Despite all of these challenges, the Great Pyramid remains a monument full of secrets, many of which are yet to be uncovered. The construction techniques and internal design of the pyramid are still the subject of intense study. Hidden chambers, passages, and shafts were built into the pyramid in such a way that they were covered by subsequent layers of stone, rendering them inaccessible without dismantling parts of the pyramid. This has left Egyptologists with a puzzle that continues to challenge them, as many areas remain unexplored. However, recent technological advancements have provided new ways to explore these hidden areas. Robots equipped with cameras, infrared thermography, and other technologies are being used to investigate sections of the pyramid that were previously unreachable. As recently as March 2023, a new 30-foot-long corridor was discovered within the pyramid using these methods, demonstrating that Khufu's monument still holds many untold stories. Despite being built over 4.5 millennia ago, the Great Pyramid remains one of the most mysterious and awe-inspiring monuments of the ancient world. Though we know some things about its creator, Pharaoh Khufu, much about his life remains shrouded in mystery. We know he ruled during the 4th dynasty around 2600 BC and that he was responsible for the construction of this colossal tomb. Beyond these basic facts, however, much of his life is left to speculation. Some ancient sources, such as Greek historians, suggest that Khufu was a tyrant who had little regard for his people or the gods, forcing his subjects to labor on his massive tomb. However, these accounts may be more myth than fact, as they were written centuries after Khufu's time. It is equally plausible that these were legends developed over time, and that Khufu's reputation was shaped by stories told long after his reign ended. Perhaps it is fitting that we know so little about the life of the man who built the Great Pyramid. Just as the secrets of his tomb remain hidden, much of Khufu's life is still veiled in mystery. His pyramid stands as a testament to the dawn of Egyptian civilization, towering over the landscape of Cairo and captivating the imaginations of people throughout the ages. Scholars generally agree that Ramesses the Great was most likely born around 1303 BC, although the exact date of his birth remains unknown. He came from a prominent aristocratic and military family, with roots in the northern part of Egypt, possibly from one of the fortified cities in the Nile Delta. His original name is uncertain, but he would later take on the title Seti I, a name that would echo through history. Ramesses' mother, Tuya, was the daughter of a military officer named Rhea, making her part of Egypt's military nobility. Born into a prosperous world, Ramesses experienced one of the ancient world's golden ages, the height of the Bronze Age. This was a time when centralized states flourished across the eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. In Greece, powerful city-states like Mycenae on the mainland and the Minoans on Crete dominated the landscape. These societies were already developing complex literary and artistic traditions that would influence the ancient world for centuries. In what is now Turkey, the Hittite Empire had emerged as a dominant force, with its capital in Hattusa. By the time of Ramesses' birth, the Hittites had begun expanding into the Levant and Mesopotamia, challenging Egypt for supremacy in the region. Further to the southeast, powerful states like the Babylonian and Assyrian empires were rising in Mesopotamia and Persia, with wealthy bureaucracies and extensive trade networks spanning the ancient world. Trade was thriving across this Bronze Age network. A merchant in the Levantine cities of Tyre or Sidon in the 14th century BC could buy pottery from Knossos in Crete, olive oil from Athens, papyrus from Egypt, and textiles from Mesopotamia and Persia. These goods were traded for gold, silver, and copper sourced from areas like western Anatolia, controlled by the Hittites, or Cyprus, a major center for copper mining. Copper, along with tin, was crucial in making bronze, which was essential for the chariots, weapons, and tools of the time. Egypt, too, was at the center of this era of wealth and progress. Ramesses was born during the New Kingdom period, which had begun in the 16th century BC and extended beyond his lifetime. The term New Kingdom is a modern construct coined by 19th century Egyptologists, but it is widely accepted as a distinct period in Egypt's history, marked by greater prosperity than the Old Kingdom, when the famous pyramids of Giza were built a millennium earlier. The New Kingdom saw the pharaohs establish a powerful government run by viziers and scribes. They maintained a large standing army equipped with bronze weapons and chariots, allowing them to expand Egypt's influence beyond its traditional borders. During this time, Egypt pushed further down the Nile into Nubia, modern-day Sudan, and expanded its territories on the Sinai Peninsula and into Canaan and Lebanon. All right, that's the end of the part 1. Like and comment below if you'd like an exploration for part 2. Thanks for watching.